Okay, boys and girls, so today our book is going to be about Martin Luther King Jr. And with reading this book, we are going to do a cause and effect activity together. So make sure to pause the video, grab a paper and a pencil or anything so you can write with. And after you grab your paper, make sure you can draw it or fold it into 3 sections, and then you're gonna go half, and then you're gonna go 1, 2. So you have one section here, one here, and one here. We're gonna focus on our cause first. So I wrote 3 of them down, so you already have them. And while I'm reading the book, if you find the effect of them, you can go ahead and write them. So for our first one is going to be unfair laws took away the rights of many blacks. So make sure to write that down on your first one. Our second one is going to be thousands stopped riding the bus for almost a year. And then our last one is going to be Martin and thousands of people fought for equal rights for many years with no violence. So make sure you write all of these 3 under the cause. And then when we're reading them, if you find the effect of any of these, make sure to write them on this side. And then at the end, we will do them together. So we're going to get started with our book. So we're doing Martin Luther King Jr. So this is our table of contents. Our introduction. Each year we celebrate Martin Luther King Day. We remember the life and work of a great African American leader. Who was this man? Life in the South. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in 1929. He grew up in a loving family. When he was 19, he decided to become a minister. His first job was at a church in the state of Alabama. So right here in our picture, we have the house that Martin Luther King Jr. Was raised in. Alabama is in the South, where African Americans lived under unfair laws for many years. Before the Civil War, most black people were slaves to white owners. After the Civil War, slavery ended in America. But many states in the South then passed laws to keep blacks apart from whites. So in our picture, we have a picture of Abraham Lincoln, who was our president during that time. And so it says, President Abraham Lincoln passed a special law to free the slaves. These unfair laws took away the rights of many blacks. Black children had to go to different poor schools than white children. Blacks had to use different drinking fountains and bathrooms. On buses, blacks had to sit in the back and give up their seats if whites wanted them. So in our picture, it says, a black man drinks from a fountain labeled for colored only. In 1960, around this time the photo was taken, colored was the word often used for African Americans. In 1955, a black woman refused to give up her bus seat to a white man. She was put in jail for breaking the law. When Martin heard what happened, he decided to act. So we know that Rosa Parks was that woman who refused to get up from her seat to give it to a white man. So in this picture, we have Rosa Parks, and we have a police officer who had arrested her and was taking her to jail, so he had to get her fingerprints. Starting his work. Martin wanted all Americans to have the same rights. He believed that if people worked together, they would change the unfair laws. He asked other African Americans to stop riding the city buses until the law was changed. Thousands of them stopped using the buses for years. So remember, right here, one of our causes said thousands stopped riding the bus for almost a year. So listen to this part. Some whites agreed that the law was unfair. Other whites liked things the way they were. They were angry that Martin wanted to change things. Someone even threw a bomb at his house. But the city finally changed the law to allow blacks to sit wherever they chose on buses. So in the bottom we have 2 black men sit in the front of a bus in Alabama after the law was changed. So make sure to write if we found our effect. I have a dream. In 1963, Martin helped lead marches to change other laws in the South. Many of the people at one march were children. When police used force to stop the march, some of the children were badly hurt. So in our picture, we have a group of marchers run for safety as they are sprayed with powerful fire hoses. Around the country, people saw how African Americans were treated. More and more people wanted to change the laws to be fair to everyone. When Martin led a march in Washington, D.C., more than 250,000 black and white Americans marched with him. So here we have a picture of that march, and it says, Martin's 1963 march on Washington ended near the Lincoln Memorial. At this time, it was the largest march ever held in the Capitol. At the march, Martin spoke to a cheering crowd. He shared his dream that one day the color of a person's skin wouldn't matter. All people would be free at last. The next year, the United States passed the law ending the separation of blacks and whites. The work wasn't over though. Many blacks were still poor. Their lives were still hard. Martin kept working for better homes, schools, and jobs for them. Then, in the spring of 1968, Martin was shot by a white male. Martin died at age 39. People around the world felt shocked and sad. Martin Luther King Jr. was a hero who worked to make the world a better place. Today, we remember him for helping to make the laws fair for people of every color. And this is our glossary. So if you have to go back, make sure you go back to find any of the effects from our causes. So now we're going to go back to our activity. So if you didn't find any, make sure to go back to the video where we're reading it and try to find any of them. And then you can come back to this part. So for our first one, what we're going to do is I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to go with the effect. So our first one was unfair laws took away the rights of many blacks. So make sure to pause the video if you haven't put your effect yet and go back until you find it. So for our effect, I wrote, they became slaves and were forced to live different lives. Example is that they had to go to different schools. So there were unfair laws for African Americans, and because of these unfair laws, they were treated very different, and a lot of them became slaves to white owners. Now for our second one. Our second cause is thousands stopped riding the bus for almost a year. So make sure you go back to the book and try to find the effect and write it down. Pause the video if you have to. So for what I wrote for the effect was the law was changed and they were able to sit anywhere on the bus. So our cause, when African Americans stopped riding the bus, they knew that something had to change. So our effect from that was the law was actually changed and they were actually able to sit anywhere they wanted if they were riding a bus. And for our last one, our last cause was Martin and thousands of people fought for equal rights for many years with no violence. So what was the effect of this one? So for mine, I wrote, the United States finally ended laws that separated blacks and whites. So the entire book actually talks about how Martin and thousands of people fought for equal rights. And after fighting for many years, the United States ended up changing those laws, and they were able to become one, and blacks and whites weren't separated anymore. So make sure you have your cause and effect.